Bodner, Bob Friesen. Should I start again? Yeah. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Grimsby Greens Tree Planting Workshop. I'm Leanne Vardy, Ward 2 Councillor and Chair of the Grimsby Green Advisory Committee. I want to acknowledge the other committee members, Councillor Bradzi, George Bodner, Bob Friesen, Marilyn McRae, Travis Hawes, and John Goodyear. I would like to start today by doing a land acknowledgement. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattawandurunk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The municipality of Grimsby stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship on the lands on which we live. We're thrilled to welcome to today's workshop focused on growing and strengthening our urban tree canopy. This is an important conversation and we're excited to kick it off with a shared goal, learning how we can all contribute to the successful, sustainable tree planting in our communities, from understanding soil health to choosing the right species. We're fortunate to have some incredible speakers with us today who will share their expertise, insights, and on-the-ground experiences. We have Jason Henry from Vineland Research and Innovation Center, who will be speaking on how you can properly prepare your land for a tree planting. Jason is a research scientist in the Plant Responses and the Environment Department, focusing his efforts on improving soil for healthy plant establishment. He has over 10 years of experience with both a bachelor's and a master's degree in environmental science. And we have Stuart McPherson from the NPCA, who will be speaking on native species and how to select the right species for your planting. Stuart is the supervisor of the Trees for All program, an initiative that focuses on partnering with organizations to help achieve the Government of Canada's 2 billion trees program. He has 15 years of experience, a Bachelor of Environmental Science from Trent University, and a diploma in ecosystem management from Fleming College. I want to share some interesting stats about Grimsby's urban canopy. According to the 2024 Tree and Forest Canopy Report that was published by the Niagara region, Grimsby has an overall tree canopy cover of 24%, which is just below the regional average of 25%. However, this percentage relies heavily on our naturalized areas and woodlots that are often inaccessible to the public and therefore do not provide the same benefits as an urban tree planting. When we look specifically at our urban areas, the difference becomes more significant. Grimsby has just 17% urban canopy cover, well below the regional urban average of 23.8%. This disparity is largely due to the limited availability of green space in our urban environment. In fact, 31% of Grimsby's urban landscape is made up of impervious surfaces, such as roads, driveways, and buildings, compared to the regional average of 20.3%. With limited land available in our built-up areas, we'll have to work together as a community to support and increase the urban tree canopy. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few quick housekeeping items. Washrooms are located just outside the council chambers to the right. Please feel free to use them as needed, as we won't be taking scheduled breaks today. We will have a period for questions following each presentation. For those joining us virtually, we ask that you use the raise hand function to ask questions during these times. This session will be recorded and posted on the town website at a later date. I'm going to pass you over now to Jason, but first I would like to thank everyone involved in putting this workshop together and remind everyone to keep their eye out for the upcoming Earth Day events. Thank you. So Jason, if you'd like to come to the podium.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Henry, and today I'll be presenting to you about healthy soils and kind of the research that we've been working on at Vineland Research and Innovation Center to really promote the urban canopy. So a lot of the steps that I'll be talking about today are really focused on below ground and how we can prepare it, for then when we plant and have our successful canopy. For those of you that don't know the Vineland Research and Innovation Center, we're a not-for-profit research organization really focused on improving the economic viability, sustainability, and competitiveness of the horticultural industry. And so the main question we get is why urban trees? Urban trees are still a part of what resales have for a lot of our nurseries. And so we have a lot of nurseries that produce stock that we plant out into the industry. A lot of changeovers happen in urban forestry. We had the fall of the green ash, we've had the fall of the elm, and we have potential losses for Norway maples right now with invasive pests and diseases coming in. And so it's always a risk for kind of both our horticultural industry or our tree nurseries in our urban areas. So a lot of our research is focused on really planting the right species, but also preparing the right soil for those species to come in. Vineland is a results oriented organization. And so a lot of the research that we do has to be applied to whatever industry they're working in. And so the department I work for is the plant responses and the environment team. And our area and our focus is really about soils and urban forestry. And so the main research team that I work with focuses on soil health and really promoting that urban environment. And then we have another side of our team that focuses on the urban forestry side. So a lot of our research right now to date has been on soil health because it's been the forgotten research area for urban forestry. A lot of what we've kind of poached and gathered along the way is really focused on farming or forestry from up north, but we've never actually developed a research program for soils in an urban environment. And so that's what the Research Consortium, one of the projects really focused on, what do urban soils look like? And so a lot of what we focus on is kind of promoting soil and promoting it to be a living system. And so we focus on adding materials in that breathes life back into the soil. Taking a step back from our research team, we also started a research consortium, which involves right now 25 members of the urban value chain that really focuses on putting trees into the ground and making sure that they have a successful future. The town of Grimsby is a part of this program where they are part of kind of being a portion or a part of the urban value chain tree that can apply the research. The MPCA is also a part of it, but there's a lot of members that have collective problems and we look at finding solutions for them. And so if you ever have a chance, that's one of the links to the Globe and Mail post on the Research Consortium to kind of go over a lot of the areas and research we do. So who am I? My name is Jason Henry. I did my master's, or I did my undergraduate degree in environmental science at Trent University. And then I did my master's degree at Trent University looking at soil quality in Irish grasslands and how Irish grasslands were getting impacted by pollution and actually destroying the soil, and then ultimately impacting how grasslands and the tree or the communities of species that go in them. And so a lot of urban impacts happen, and what happens first is damage in the soil, and then it usually affects the plant community. And so that was a lot of what my research focused on. 12 years ago, 2013, I started with Vineland and started as a technician and then kind of worked my way up to a research scientist, really focusing on soil and substrates, where trees or any types of plants are planted. So like I said before, we kind of had two pillars for the plant responses, the environment team. We have the soils and substrate team. That's my team that focuses on soil health, which I'll be talking about today. And then we have the urban forestry team that focuses on what trees to plant, how to plant them, and a lot of the performance and metrics that go in for care afterwards. So a lot of the work that I work on is really getting the ground ready for planting. So what is soil? Soil is actually four main components, and two of them are usually the forgotten ones. So there's a mineral component, so sand, silt, and clay. We have an organic component, so your organic matter. And then the two forgotten ones is actually water and air. Half of soil is supposed to be empty space. The other side is that solid phase. So when you're focusing on your gardens and you're focusing on kind of that soil below, your best bang for your buck is that empty or what we call void space. That's where it's going to hold your water. That's what's going to hold your air. And what happens in our urban environments is that when soil is compacted or compressed or really stomped on, that reduces that void space. And so the image to the on the top is ideal soil. So it's got a 50-50 split between that kind of brown side with the solid phase, and then that bluer phase is the kind of open space, which holds water and air. When we compact our soils, and it's really, really easy to actually compact our soils. Even when I walk on it after a rainfall, I'll start compacting that surface soil. And so when that happens, that's when we change that void space. So usually when I work with soils, my main focus is on decompacting the soil, adding organic matter back in, and kind of breathing life back in it. It's really easy to destroy soil. It's actually pretty easy to fix soil too, only if we spend the time, effort, and kind of resources to do that. And so a lot of what I focus on is teaching people how to recover their soil. And so I always add in this kind of slide. Traditionally, so what people feel is standard soil is, we call them horizons. We have the O horizon, so your organic matter, which is like your humus layer. We have this A horizon, which is a nice darker soil. We have our B horizon, which consists of kind of a bit more mineral soil. We have our C horizon, which is all rocks. And that's what a perfect soil is in a non-disturbed environment. When we look at urban soils, that's not the case at all. And so the running joke that a lot of soil scientists have is when we call topsoil in the urban environment is usually just top of soil. It's actually not topsoil itself. It's been stripped, it's been destroyed, and it doesn't have the structure sometimes to really put trees into the ground. It's pretty good for turf grass. It's not good for planting a lot of trees. And so a lot of the focus is kind of restoring that topsoil. What's also important to note is that most of the tree roots, when you think about how big those trees get, a lot of the surface roots are probably within the first 30 centimeters. So if those 30 centimeters are actually heavily degraded, that's where it's getting access to most of its resources like air, water, and nutrients and stability. And so a lot of the focus that we work on is those first 30 centimeters. If you can go deeper, it's always better, but it costs a lot more to do that. So we kind of do light touches for soil restoration that really focus on that. So the main thing that we focus on is soil health. And what's usually unique about it is that before we really started, a lot of what we focused on in soils is nutrient content. What is your nutrient content in your soil to plant the crop? And that came from an old kind of traditional method 100, 150 years ago, where it was called the law of minimums. And so if you wanted a huge yield of crop, you just found out which nutrient is lacking, which is usually nitrogen or phosphorus, and you can push as much of that material in to really boost your yields. And so this really became a huge kind of success that drove our agricultural industry because we could increase our crops with very minimal inputs. What we've been finding out more recently is soils are actually living systems. It's pretty intuitive now, but 100 years ago, it wasn't really thought about as that. And so what we found was for soil health, treating it as a living system and a dynamic system was more important because right now where we put a lot of kind of nutrients into our soils for agriculture, we can't sustain the yields and there's something missing in it. And so one of the big things that we've started focusing on now, and it's becoming more prevalent, is the physical, the chemical, the biological, and the hydrological components of soil. So the physical components are your sand, silt, and clay, how compact your soil is. We have the traditional chemical, which is pH, micro and macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. But what we were really missing is a biological component, how microbes actually function in your soil, how they interact with your plants was kind of one of the biggest drivers that we're actually missing from our system. And so when we kept pushing more and more of our soils and asking more and more of them, what's interesting about how soils have evolved is a lot of organic matter houses all your nutrients. So if you have organic matter in your soil, that means you have a storehouse for your nutrients. Clays also stockpile nutrients as well, especially for phosphorus and for potassium. But when you look at your nitrogen content in your soils, 95% of your nitrogen is actually tied up in your organic matter. And what nature has kind of done with that is that when microorganisms in your soil break down organic matter, they release nutrients to your plants so that they can uptake it, your plants grow, and then once the plants die, they put organic matter back in and complete the cycle. What's nice about this is microbes are actually kind of evolved to be with a hydrological cycle too. When it rains, water enters your soils. This starts your biological cycle that kind of allows your microbes to start consuming your organic matter. They release your nutrients, the plants uptake it, the plants kind of grow stronger, they fix your physical side of your soil, so they build soil structure. And then as that cycle continues, your soil actually repairs itself. When you damage soil, you usually damage the biological side first. You take out those microbes, and then it's very difficult to grow unless you're constantly feeding your soil with nutrients. This is a lot more difficult in the urban environment because when you plant a tree, usually it's a one-shot go. You want that soil to be functioning and living, and then that tree kind of continues to grow. And so this is one of the biggest failures that we've seen kind of in urban soils is damaged soils usually have no or limited biology in them. So why soils are good and why soils are important. Healthy soils will regulate water. What's really challenging about unhealthy soils, especially for right now with climate change happening, we have these drought cycles and then heavy rainfall, drought cycles and heavy rainfall. And so regulating water is really important for these types of systems because when it rains, it pours. It needs to capture as much water as possible, maintain it, and then kind of give it to the tree or any plants as they grow. This helps sustain the plant growth, and it also allows animals to kind of go into the soil. Healthy soils promote healthy trees, which then help filter and buffer potential pollutants. Healthy soils also kind of allow nutrient cycling and allows for roots to kind of extend out. So this is kind of the graph or image that we had where if you don't have a solid foundation right at the beginning, you're not going to have a solid tree growth. You'll have a lot of tip dieback, especially during droughts. This year was a perfect example of droughts, not in our area, but when we look at up north, kind of in Barrie, they had 58 days where it did not rain. And so when you are asking your trees to grow and kind of sustain themselves for 58 days without water, you're asking a lot from them. And so if you don't have that healthy root system and that healthy soil, they can't push out for that long. And so this is kind of what we focus on. This is kind of a funny one, but it's also not funny too. So this is a park in the Niagara region. I'm not going to say where it is, but this actually shows you why soils are so important. When I say it, when it rains, it pours. If you go from a drought period where soils are completely dry and they don't have the pore space to absorb all that water. And then a heavy rainfall happens, so 30 mils to 60 mils of rain. If that water can't enter the soil, it goes to the lowest point possible. And so this is kind of one of the parks that it went to as the lowest point. So you have a happy kayaker there going in and around the trees. And so this is kind of why we really show the importance of soil health, is because our climate is changing and we need to adapt to it. It's changing quicker than we can adapt. And so the best area and the best defense that we can sometimes have is actually utilizing our soils to adapt to climate change. And so this is a one picture, but a lot of research is going into absorbent landscaping now, making soils more absorbent or a sponge. So a lot of what we focus on is promoting healthy soils. And just because you have a bad or a soil that's degraded, all soil has potential. It's all about decompacting it, adding organic matter back in, and then allowing nature to take its course. Soils are actually really good at repairing itself. It may take longer than what we're hoping for, but without any human intervention, it might take 100 to 500 years for that soil to fully repair itself if it's completely damaged. Generally, our lifespan doesn't last to that extent, and so we want to push it quicker, especially when we're out planting or planting trees. And so a lot of what we focus on for our research is soil restoration and preparing it to go. So these are two soils that I've worked in. The hole that I'm in is a park that we will be planting in. It's not the best soil possible. It's not the worst soil possible I've ever seen. But when you look at it for kind of the natural soil that's 750 meters away, you can kind of see that dark horizon of soil. It's your A horizon, and then the lighter soil is your B horizon. And so the park that we're in, we are digging pits, we're figuring out the state of the soil, and then from that we can actually understand what restoration plan we want to do to put life back into the soil. And so the soil that we had is just soil with a lot of potential, but it's realizing that potential first, amending it, and then moving forward with it. And so this is kind of what we focus on. So like I said, a lot of soil has potential, and we work with a lot of restoration plans in place. So we build a lot of restoration plans with municipalities or different organizations before they plant. And so what's really nice about our restoration plans is that it's actually common gardening practices. Breaking up the soil, so depending on the size of the site and what your end goal is, we've used an excavator to break up soils along the highways. We've looked at kind of just traditional agricultural equipment for parkways, but this is kind of a unique project that we were working on, and it's the Mini Forest project, where they were just actually putting in, they removed the sod, and then they actually did a passive restoration process where they applied a layer of compost, they applied a layer of mulch, and then they watered it in and allowed it to rest for about 2 months before they plant. And so what's unique about this is that microbes will then take all those resources, any insects as well, pull it all down. And then when you plant the trees in, those roots will have access to a bit more air and water, and those roots will actually start healing the soil. What's important about soil health is soil is not alone when you're building it. They actually require plants to actually help amend the soil as well. So soil isn't alone when it's restoring itself. You can restore the soil as best as you can, but if you plant nothing in it afterwards, the soil is never going to fully heal itself. It's that interaction between plants and animals and the soil that actually completes the cycle. As a homeowner, there's a lot you can do. Compost is kind of one of the best ways. You can apply it on your surface. You can plant it around the tree. Mulches are important as well. Just adding inorganic amendments really help out. Some of the things I do at home, and sometimes this is kind of people can don't like leaves, but actually leaves are a huge resource. What's actually nice about leaves is that it completes a cycle. A tree absorbs a lot of nutrients, breaks down organic matter. If you allow the leaves to fall in the ground, that'll actually cycle its way back into your soil and then replenish it again. So there are programs called Leave the Leaves that you can rake them. Sometimes I just throw them in the garden, or I kind of allow them to break down and I kind of mulch them up with my lawnmower. But one of the biggest things that I found is passive restoration on your properties are kind of some of your best techniques. After 10 years of living in my home, I've probably increased my organic matter by quite a bit just by leaving the leaves in the ground, allowing kind of grass to grow, and allowing plants to kind of bring organic matter back in and kind of breathe life into the soils. And so this is kind of one of the programs that I do recommend for homeowners. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm always happy to help.
Thank you very much, Jason. I have lots of questions, but I'll see if anyone else in the audience or online has questions first. Maybe if you say your question, you could repeat it so it'll get recorded. Anyone in the gallery have a question?
A lot of the trees that we're planting in urban areas are often compacted soil, disturbs land. Do you know, municipalities, when they're planting trees along streets, is there a restoration policy, in any municipalities, or is that something?
So the question is, do municipalities have restoration plans for soil, especially in urban areas where the soil has been compacted? And to my knowledge, most municipalities don't. The only area or the region that has kind of a soil action plan is York Region, where they will replace the soil that's heavily degraded and compacted and import in an engineered growing media. So this is an expensive process where you can remove the soil and then replace it. And where they utilize it is on boulevards and mediums only. The challenge with that is that it's very expensive. And so what we've been working on with the town of Grimsby is ideas and actions where when the trees are planted, can we restore the area around that soil, allow those roots to push out of the planting hole, and then actually start amending itself. And one of the first phases that we did with the research consortium was we found out soils in the urban environment, they're always lacking one thing. And if we give them that one thing, they can start healing itself. And so we started developing kind of restoration plans for municipalities where you can apply a little bit of compost around the planting hole, a mulch plan, but then you do that all on the surface. So you can come back to that tree for 1 to 3 years, keep applying that and actually put the stuff that you need in the soil to allow that material to grow. And so that would be the restoration plan that we've been really promoting with people. And it's cost effective and it gives the trees kind of the best case. The other thing that Stuart will be talking about is species selection too. So if you plant the right species into the right soil, you provide the few ingredients that it needs, that's what we would recommend.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was just interested, do you have a rough idea of how much that increases the cost of having doing that restoration? Not in the extent that York does it, but,
Yeah.
But just adding that mulch for 3 years.
I think it would add, so the tree usually costs, depending on the size of the tree, like a caliper tree would cost $500 to maybe $700, really rough numbers, to plant that tree, buy the tree. The mulch, what we've been looking at is different avenues for mulch. So sometimes a lot of municipalities, regions have a lot of organic matter that they already have at their disposal. It's seeing if that organic matter is suited for that area. So we would add cost, but not as much as we would think it would. It's a lot cheaper.
Any more questions? Yes, go ahead.
So as you're talking about that, and going back to farmers, I mean, everybody does no-till these days, and they just add nitrogen and phosphorus to, enrich the soil. So what I hear you saying, you're going to do that for so long before you've got to do a deep, old stuff or whatever.
Ah.
Am I hearing that correctly?
So the question is about agriculture and adding nutrients into the soil for a no-till system. So no-till is kind of, so the concept actually stepping one step back, no-till systems are kind of breaking up the soil and decompacting it, adding in oxygen, which then breaks down organic matter, releases nutrients. It allows you to put nutrients in to the system to allow it to grow. No-till is providing no tillage. And it really relies on healthy soils. So it is a different production system. No-till provides kind of, what's unique about no-till is that if you leave the roots into the ground, those roots provide air pockets. It adds still organic matter going in and should have nutrients in. You still have to fertilize it, but it does kind of allow it. Where there's issues sometimes with agriculture in a sense of applying fertilizers is when you don't have the organic matter in the soil and there's limited houses for that space. So organic matter kind of holds a lot of nutrients in place. The plants will uptake it. Where a lot of nutrients kind of leave the system is those crops leave the system too. And so when you lose those crops to feed people, those are taking nutrients away. And so you have to put the nutrients back into the soil. Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
I wondered, Jason, what a homeowner might do. Contributing to the healthy microbiome of plants, the fungus and bacteria associated with the roots and other parts of the plant.
Yep. So the question is about kind of applying products to improve the soil biology, whether it be the bacteria, the fungi, or any of the living microorganisms in the system. And one of the big things is for any soil to function biologically, it needs organic matter in the system. If it has no food source for microbes to kind of go in, there most likely will be limited biology in the soil. So the first step for a lot of homeowners for urban soils, and what I would recommend, is putting down compost and mulch. Once you start bringing in that organic matter, eventually soil biology is going to get back into the system. There's compost teas you can use. There's different mycorrhizae fungi you can apply. There's different products on the market that are widely available. But without that organic matter in the soil, there's not as much they usually can feed on for heavily degraded soils. So I've used at home compost teas, and that's worked out well, but I've also built up my organic matter over time. And so the first step is to add organic matter. The second step is then you can wait and allow that biology to come to itself, or you can start putting products in.
I've heard mixed opinions of the value of the compost tea. Which numbers of regional firms are selling at quite a cost and they inject it into the soil. Is that a good approach, or would it be compost better?
So the research is lacking behind, for the research side, research is lacking on the different products, and it's still catching up to it's still taking time to catch up to kind of the different products on the market. For our research purposes, we focused on adding organic matter in first. And from that purpose, we saw soil biology just spike up quite a bit. So your first step is what I always recommend, and it's easy access for homeowners, is compost, manures, mulches, really organic amendments that you can buy at different commercial stores will be the first step I would take for that, for a homeowner.
Thank you, Jason. I have a few questions, but first let me say that's an absolutely fascinating presentation. While I'm the chair of this committee, I have people who sit on the committee that are, really well educated about green initiative. However, I am not one of those people. I just function as the chair and keep conversation going. So all of this was really edifying for me. I was going to ask you about should we leave the leaves? And you answered that question, leave the leaves. And that's certainly what we'll do because we have 2 giant maples on our property. And we usually have about 70 bags of leaves. So we're just going to leave them in place. I want to have a question about microbes because I understand that there's some kind of, not a worm or some kind of thing that you can put on your lawn, let's say. Some kind of living thing. I don't know what it's, I thought it was some kind of microbe, that it's not manure, not something. Do you know, can you tell me what that is and if it's a useful thing? And if so, I guess my next question is, do you put them in these things in the winter or do you or in the fall rather, or in the spring? When is the best time to be, supporting this cycle?
No. Oh, perfect. So what's unique about kind of grass is that when you have a lot of or you have one species that's dominant over a landscape, you get pests and diseases into the system. And so a lot of what you see for grass, if you see bare patches slowly dying, or kind of roots weakening, usually there's grubs in your soil that are feeding on that. And so they'll turn the larvae or kind of that insect that crawls around in the ground, and then they'll come out of the soil. But during their feeding stage, they'll be consuming the roots, and then it damages, and eventually, if you don't get enough water in the system, it kills your grass. So nematodes are a spray that you can put down. It's a biological control, which I don't want to paint a picture, but they kind of go into the grubs and eliminate them. And so they are a biological control that you can spray on your grass that kind of reduces the population. And then after a few cycles, I've had this on my grass too, and I've had to apply it a few years ago, and then eventually the grass system takes over. But it's just a biological that kind of reduces grubs. And so yeah, it's pretty common. There's set times, so you'd have to go to a nursery or any commercial area that sells these products. They'll tell you the right time. Nematodes are spread at certain time periods, usually I think the fall time and springtime when the soil temperature is cooler, not in the heat. And it's also during the growth cycles for these insects. And so they are products that do kind of reduce those populations in it.
So we want to have healthy lawns, presumably in an urban area, because that's where we're going to plant our trees. So the more we make our lawns and kind of healthy in that way, then the better it's going to be for when we start to actually put the tree in the ground. But then I have a question, and it relates to Bob in our gallery, who asked about what can municipalities do. Now, I understand there's something, it's called a cell. and the trees are planted in this cell. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So so what's unique or not unique? So town of Grimsby has kind of impervious surface areas. And in those impervious surface areas, we want to plant trees to promote a greener and vibrant future. So when we look at downtown areas, you'll see trees kind of coming out of those hardscape areas. So you have your sidewalks, you have your roadways, and you have kind of this little patch of soil that kind of promotes those trees to grow. What's challenging about that is roots can only go underground, and they need to support the above ground material. So a lot of what we've is focused on is promoting that root space to grow trees. What's harder about that is providing root space in those kind of hardscape soils. So we kind of, some people call them almost like tree coffins, where you plant your tree and they almost have access to one meter by 1 meter by 1 meter deep soil. And that really functions as that tree's living system. Where there's different technologies on the market now where you can provide infrastructure that can hold up a sidewalk, hold up a roadway, hold up kind of this, the materials around it. And then you can put soil in place. And so you can put healthy soil in, allow those roots to expand so that they're growing a lot, kind of moving out into the soil a lot more without having any or reducing the complications with having a road in place. So a lot of the soils that we build are meant to hold up a roadway just because we don't want our infrastructure collapse. This is what is added to a system that allows you to have uncompacted soil while having the infrastructure like your roadway or sidewalk held up. On the flip side to that, so there's different technologies on the market. One example is Silvacell, but there's a few others on the market as well. The cost is usually a lot higher. So one tree could cost somewhere between $5,000 to $20,000. So they are kind of expensive areas that can cost a lot for infrastructure, but they are great because they also can be built into stormwater management systems. So there's ways you can kind of diversify that cost. The other technology that's out there is structural soils. So soils that are rocky, that can hold up a sidewalk, but have kind of soil in it for tree roots to grow. This is kind of one of the areas that Vineland's exploring in for one of the case studies for the research consortium. And so how do we plant trees in hardscapes that promote roads, promote sidewalks, but also focus on trees as well? And so this is a huge area that a lot of people are focusing on now.
Jason, thank you very much. This has really been a wonderful presentation. So I think now we'll move on to Stuart McPherson. And he'll be presenting on native species and selecting the right species for your planting. Please join me in welcoming Stuart to the session.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about tree planting in the Niagara Peninsula watershed and some of the benefits of planting native species. So just a little bit about the NPCA. It was founded in 1959 under the Conservation Authorities Act. I think we have 41 properties, but the core mandate of the conservation authorities is to undertake watershed-based programs to protect people and property from flooding and other natural hazards, and to conserve natural resources for economic, social, and environmental benefits. So we're based on watersheds rather than political boundaries. So the Niagara Peninsula watersheds boundaries are the entire, it's actually not true because there's a sliver of Grimsby that belongs to the Hamilton Conservation Authority, but we typically say all of Niagara and some parts of Haldimand and parts of Hamilton, as the Welland River and 20 Mile Creek get up into those areas. And so we've got the main basins we drain into are Lake Erie, the the Niagara River, and Lake Ontario. So a little bit about native plants. Native plants have evolved over time for over thousands of years to create these local ecosystems that we have here. They provide critical habitat for and food sources for that wildlife depend on, that wildlife from this area depend on. And adding these things back into our ecosystem, trees specifically, is one of the most impactful things that any of us can do. So what makes a tree native? This is always kind of an interesting question. I know myself personally, when I go to a garden center or something like this, I'll ask sometimes if they have a selection of native plants, and they'll take me over. And there's a whole bunch of cultivars that they have. So it'll be a red maple, but it'll be called an Amur red maple. Or they'll have, these are some wildflowers, but they always have like an X or quotations on it, and they have given another name. And I think the research has been fairly strong to show that these are not nearly as beneficial for wildlife or pollinators or all these other things that we're trying to support with these. But in general, native plants are plants that have been here for thousands of years. They've kind of evolved to be here to face our climate that we have, and are more adapted to our climate, our changing climate especially. But they're used to our cold winters and our warm summers and the amount of rain we get, and sometimes the drought we get. And they're kind of best suited to be able to handle the kind of as our environment changes, but they're best suited to be in this space. The non-natives, some of them do very well. In fact, you could say our invasive species that are here are highly successful. But there's lots of challenges that come with them, and they don't support wildlife in the same way. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Carolinian Forest, which is where we are. So here's the map of Canada, you can see, and in the bottom, just between along the north shore of Lake Erie, kind of just to Lake Ontario, you'll see a little blue area, and that's the Carolinian zone. It's the smallest, it's one of the smallest areas that we have, or ecozones that we have in Canada. It's the warmest climate we have in Canada. It's moderated by the Great Lakes. It's got the highest plant diversity in Canada. It supports more than 2,250 native plants and animals that live here. And often this is because these are animals that are migrating north and south, or they're moving, but we also have just a ton of, as two areas kind of meet, we're in the middle, and we get a lot of mixing of different things here. And it also supports the largest number of trees anywhere in Canada, a number of species of trees. So often if you said, where do you think the most biodiverse place in Canada is? And I think a lot of us would probably say, oh, it's the rainforests in British Columbia, those temperate rainforests, they're just dripping with life. And the answer is escarpment right here. You're like not far from here at all. This is the most biodiverse place in all of Canada, which is sometimes surprising, but a reason to be proud of where we live. And the reason I'm talking a little bit about this is because the town of Grimsby's had a very strong, we've been working with them for a number of years on planting more trees on their properties throughout Grimsby, and they've always had a big push to say, we'd like to make sure we're planting species that are from the Carolinian zone. It's an important part. It's important to us. So just a couple of the trees that you might find here. They're not always common, but these are some of the things that you might not find anywhere else in Canada. So we've got pawpaws and tulip trees and sycamores and black gums and Kentucky coffee trees and black walnuts and butternuts and cucumber trees and sassafras trees. And these are all things you won't find anywhere else. Just a selection of some of the trees that you might find here. I think I was putting this together earlier today, and I said, oh, I've got 3 of those in my yard, which I planted, but still, it's still fun to have. So being the most biodiverse area in Canada actually also puts us at the biggest risk, because it's when you've got a lot, you've got the most to lose. And unfortunately, this is actually our smallest and most endangered forest region. Only about 25% it contains 25% of Canada's rare, threatened, or endangered species. And only about 25% of the original forest remains in the entire area. It's home to 70 species at risk. And this is a critical habitat. You can see between the lakes here, this is a critical migratory zone for birds and butterflies and everything else that are moving up north and south. Just to speak a little bit about this, I know that at the beginning, Councillor Vardy shared with us some of the stats about Grimsby zone. the research that exists from the federal government, they produced a document a few years ago, but it's called How Much Habitat is Enough? And it's really asking these questions, like, to keep what we have, how much do you need? And they said a high risk number for forest cover in a watershed is 30%. If you have 30% forest cover, you're at a high risk of losing that. Medium risk is 40% and low risk is 50%. So if we're at 25% overall across the Niagara region, we are higher than high risk. So it's critical that we put trees back on the landscape.
Carolina.
And Carolina, and it's all about the right tree in the right spot as well. So it's one of those things is we've got a lot and we've got a lot to lose. And the whole country loses out, really, when we think about the biodiversity that we have here, if we don't kind of do our part to keep these things here. So some of the benefits of native trees over other trees, for example, are I'm not going to pick on Amur maples anymore, but other non-native trees. They support 10 to 50 times as many wildlife species than non-native trees, especially pollinators and birds. They require significantly less water once we've established them, since they're adapted to our local climates. But this is, again, in concert with what Jason was just saying, you know, as long as we've got healthy soil and we've got the kind of the right foundation, they can do a lot to grow. You know, they need fewer pesticides or fertilizers to kind of keep them going because they're more adapted to our environment. And they can improve our soil health through deep root systems, prevent erosion and filter water. And just the extremes. Like I said, I think we've probably all felt very, very cold winter days, and we've all felt very hot summer days, especially this year, I think so. And so one of the things you have to start thinking about, there's a whole bunch of factors you have to think about when you're choosing the right native tree. You're going to think about the sunlight. Is this a full shade, partial shade? Is this full sun? What do we have? What are you working with? You're going to want to think about the soil. And I've got the three things here, the clay, sand, and loam, but you want to think about other things like organic matter. You're going to think about everything Jason was speaking about in terms of compaction. You want to think about drainage, or do you have a wet, a moist, or a normal site? Different trees have different preferences. You want to think about existing or future infrastructure. It probably doesn't make sense if you've got a great southern facing window that you love having the sun come into your living room, you plant a tree right outside that window, because you might enjoy it for a few years, but eventually it's going to shade it, and eventually you're going to say, I used to get so much nice, lovely sun in here. Consequently, you could also plan for that if you're getting too much sun, and you could you could plant a tree there. But there's other things besides buildings. You don't want to plant trees too close to your foundation. You want to be aware of underground utilities, and this is always what's important to get locates when you're planting trees, especially in an urban context, and above as well, right? You want to make sure you're not growing these things right into a power line or something else, because it's going to require more maintenance over time. So there's other goals that you might have when you're selecting trees. You might be thinking about animal habitats. You might be thinking about shade and where shade might fall when you plant these things. You might be planting trees for privacy, or for fall or winter color, or even spring flowers if you have special. Any of these things are reasons you might choose to help select which kind of tree you want. But the most important thing when you're planting trees is trying to put the right tree in the right spot. So trying to do a little bit of thinking about not only what you're hoping for, but what this tree will look like. And, you know, the internet's full of great resources on available species and native species, but also to be able to tell you how big this tree might get. You know, if you had a very small space, you're probably not going to want to plant a sycamore. If they're going to get pretty big. Some silver maples will get really big, and their roots will seek out water sources. So if you've got a clay main going back to the sewer, they'll find their way into there, and you'll find roots in there later on, and you'll be cursing it later on. You say, why did they plant this? Anyway, these are all different things that you might consider, but there's a whole bunch of factors that you would consider when choosing your tree species. So, you know, planting, when you're trying to dig a hole, this is some information that you might be looking for, but you're typically trying to plant either in the spring or the fall. For the programs that we run through the MPCA, where we get a lot of people involved in community tree plantings, and we also do a lot of agricultural plantings. We typically plant only in the spring and the fall. I think some people say the weather's beautiful, it's August, why aren't you guys planting right now? And this summer it didn't rain as much, just there were areas that were far worse, but it would require a lot more effort on behalf of any of our partners or ourselves to keep those trees watered and going throughout the summer. But, if you're trying to plant these trees when they're dormant in the spring or fall, then it gives them a bit more of a chance to get going and get used to the environment they're in. You're trying to typically dig a hole 2 to 3 times the width of the root ball. You don't really want to go much deeper. Every tree has a root collar, just kind of like our collars. We don't want to dig them too deep. Otherwise, it's just like us. We go great if we went for a walk into the lake up to here, but as soon as we start going deeper, we can drown and not do too well. Additionally, we want to put mulch around it. We usually add, 2 to 4 inches around the whole thing. We try to water everything as well, especially if you're at home, you can water for quite a while. And a lot of people love putting stakes on trees. I think they make it feel like it's like the bow on the present, so to speak, but they actually can have a big handle on weakening the tree because they don't allow the tree to develop its natural strength. And so if you have to stake a tree, then usually I suggest you take it off a year after. I have seen many trees in my life, and I'm sure you have as well, where you've come to the tree and it was probably planted 5 years before, and it's almost girdling the tree now because the stakes are still on there. They've got a metal wire pulling into the tree so tight, and when you try to remove it, you can't even get the wire out of it because it's now grown into the tree. It's one of those things that there's always work that needs to follow this up. It's not just a kind of a one and now we're done. The same goes with things like plastic tree guards, which can be great at keeping rodents and rabbits and things away from trees, but you are adding plastic to the environment. At some point, you're going to be just having plastic in the environment that will break down in the sun, and then somebody has to go. It'll be all in our soil, which I don't think was on your list, Jason, of things that you're trying to add in. No. And then long-term, water deeply. It doesn't have to be all the time, but watering deeply when you can. Re-adding mulch is always a great thing to do. You don't really need to fertilize native trees. You can re-add. Compost as it breaks down will become a fertilizer for it. Mulch as it breaks down will become a fertilizer as a compost, but you could also add compost into that process. I would probably put the compost beneath the mulch. You don't really need to prune native trees very often unless there's dead, dying, or diseased branches, or branches that are growing into each other. Sometimes that creates a strange form, but that doesn't need to happen very often. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, there's pests on my trees," and sometimes that's just a tree is fighting it off, but some leaf damage is okay. Sometimes even adding more compost or mulch around the base can help that as well, because it gives more nutrition for the tree to be able to fight off this stuff. And then again, leaving fallen leaves underneath trees when possible. As Jason mentioned, leave the leaves. It breaks down and will add a layer of mulch, but also will compost as well. Just as a kind of a funny anecdote, I remember when I was in school, we went up to a place called the Halliburton Forest, and there was a German man who owned and ran the forest, and he was giving us a talk, and he was talking about German forestry. And at some point, they had all their foresters. They raked up every leaf and fallen log in all their forests, and it looked like the neatest, tidiest forest you've ever seen. And all of a sudden, all their forests started dying, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And they realized that the mess was part of what made the forest work well. And so that was always, it's always stuck with me since I thought about that. And leaving these things, especially under trees. I know sometimes people want to have neat lawns, and Jason's suggestion of if there's a mulching setter on a lawnmower or something like that is great, because it's leaving the organic matter there, but it maybe it lets it get smaller pieces so it can break down and go into your grass. There's a question that people sometimes ask, where do I get native trees? I'm going to some of the regular commercial nurseries that I'm going to, and I can't find them. The MPCA has 2 published documents that share. We have a native plant guide, which is great at helping select, because select species, it'll organize things by, dry sunny sites, dry moist sites, full shade, wet sites, and you can self-select species, not only trees, but other kinds of native plants as well. And we also published a list of native plant suppliers where we vetted them, that these are localish suppliers in the local area that sell native plants. So it's probably not a complete list, and so there's new nurseries kind of coming up all the time, but these ones are vetted. So I would say that you have a lot of confidence in those ones. And some people might say, well, you know, I'd love to plant more trees, but I don't have necessarily the space to plant them on my own yard, or I really want to do this. And the good news is that if you're interested in doing this, you can help green your community. I think it was just a week and a half ago, Jillian and I were out in, actually there's pictures from it, the 40 Mile Creek Park down by Lake Ontario, and where we planted, I think, 500 trees with about 40 something volunteers one Saturday morning. And we got, it was great. We had a great morning. We had done some site prep first to try and break up the soil and add some organic amendments to it. And then we planted our trees. We had selected them based on the area. And then we had a group of volunteers come down. They had the trees all laid out. They joined in, they planted it. It was a great Saturday morning. And we've got a few more coming up. So this Saturday, we'll be in Beamsville, not very far away. Wednesday, October 22nd, we'll be at Gainsborough Conservation Area. Saturday, the 25th, we'll be in Smithville. Some more information will be that on our website. And then the 1st will be at Southbrook Drive in Binbrook. So again, not too far away. If you're interested in attending any of these, we've got a website, npca.ca/events. And or people could sign up or to volunteer through volunteering@npca.ca to be part of this. Yeah. So that's just a pretty quick overview of selecting native species and some of the benefits. But I'm here now if anyone has any questions, but thank you though.
That's a fantastic presentation. Thank you, Stuart. So I think we might have some questions. Bob?
Yes. So the question was, do we keep statistics on survival rates when we do community plantings? The answer is yes. So with every planting we do, whether it's a community planting or with our own staff, or we hire contractors to do the work, we keep statistics. So we go back and we do monitoring. So typically what this involves is some baseline monitoring. So immediately after we plant, I'll just talk you through what we do for community plantings, and then there's a similar situation that happens for some of our large scale plantings that we would do in farm fields. So for community plantings, what we do is we go back and we collect some baseline information. This is about 10% of all the trees, 10% of each species of the trees will be given a small little aluminum tag that's got a number on it. We geolocate it, so we put it into a GPS machine, and then we take some measurements of it and give a general picture of its health. We'll come back to that site the next year, which we call year 2, and then year 5, and we hope to come back in year 10 to assess their health. So we're looking for its mortality. Is it alive or dead, right? Is it its growth? So what's its height currently at? We're going to look for its crown height, which is going to tell us a bit more about its growth and how it's doing. We're going to look for signs of damage, either from browse from animals or machines, because sometimes these things are in parks. And so, you know, if there's a maintenance person who's been a little bit careless, sometimes that can damage things, or it can just be kids riding their bikes through areas. Or, I mean, we've been in lots of places where there's ATVs or dirt bikes or something like that, where people have run these things over. And then, so we do this for 10% of each species that we do, which ends up being about 10% of the entire thing that we planted. And then we also look at it in the sense for, we try to make sure that that 10% is representative of everything that is there. So there's also like kind of a walk around to make sure that not just the 10% of species, which are scattered throughout the entire planting area, are still like fairly representative. But this informs a couple of things. It gives us information about how the planting's doing. And typically, I think we're seeing around 80% is what we're seeing is surviving. Occasionally we see less, and that might be from a drought, or it's usually due to someone physically damaging the trees. Occasionally we've had, I think we've done plantings in farmers' fields where a herd of deer have come out and had a healthy lunch. But otherwise, we try to keep stats on all this because it informs future management of how we're gonna, if there's an issue and it falls below a certain percentage, we're gonna want to go back and replant in that area. But it will inform our plans too, about how certain species are doing. So it will let us make some decisions based on that.
Go ahead, John.
Under the long-term planning for tree planting and selection of species, to what extent was the NPCA factoring climate warming, which will shift ecosystems to the north
Yes.
or degrade or change what already exists, including heritage?
This is a good question. It's about how the NPCA factors in climate change and like kind of shifting ecoregions over time. And I think we're at the very early stages of this. So for a long time, we've been focusing on native species only. There's other organizations which I'm familiar with, and the species do well right now, but they'll plant spruces and they'll plant a whole host of species that you typically find in more northern climates. We've tried to stick to native species, but through a couple different groups that we work with, there has been more of a push to try and get some species from more southern areas. So they call this assisted migration and how we can assist, how we can help tree species move. Trees do move over time as seeds dispersed and other things like that. That happens, but not nearly at the speed that we can help them move, right? So I think what we're always trying to do is keep an eye out for sites where this makes a lot of sense to work on. Often this ends up being our own properties because we can go back and kind of just to study how these things have worked. But it's also about a little bit of a challenge for us because we have to be able to find the seed sources and nurseries that are growing these species to be able to do this. And I think it's an area that we would like to move more towards because we're very aware of how this is happening. But it is a challenge nonetheless to get the science to catch up with to have our practices catch up with where all the science is starting to go.
Go ahead.
Homeowners in Grimsby, have a tree canopy of 25% or less. We've got a lot of mature trees in Grimsby. What happens when they go? The chances are the amount of development around it will not allow trees of that undersize to grow again. What can we do there?
That's a good question. The question is about in town of Grimsby, we've got 25% tree cover in our urban areas. Actually, so I think it was slightly less than that in the urban areas.
17.
17 in our urban areas. And some of the larger trees, when they go, will we have space again to put that same tree? I think to answer this question, it requires homeowners to look at this a little bit differently, right? Like if you have a large tree in your yard and you're thinking, I've seen other large trees this size come down in my neighborhood in the last few years, then you should probably be trying to think ahead a little bit. You kind of don't want to wait for that tree to have to go before you go and buy your, 1 or 2 or 5 gallon potted tree and put that on the ground because you're going to be waiting even longer. Trees do some really remarkable things. There's great books about this, about how trees will help nourish each other. And so you can have a small tree planted nearby, and when that large tree goes, the next one will shoot up, and it's already established, and it's got some roots that are going in there. And I think that's something that could really help in those situations, is by doing a little bit of planning for the future. Now, sometimes you're going to be in areas that Jason was talking a little bit before, in areas that are surrounded by concrete, and the cost might be too much to replace those. But that's why it's really important to plant trees where we can. So often when we work with the town of Grimsby, we're focused in parks and along creeks, because these are what we call part of our natural heritage system where we can really add to this. But for homeowners, their backyards and their front yards are spots. And I think often people just kind of think about the front yard because the city might put a tree in, but your backyard's there too. And I spend more time on my backyard than my front yard. So I like to have the shade in the backyard, just especially when it's hot, because it makes a difference.
South of Grimsby or the, tree planting committee could make that more widely available to homeowners, and some kind of publication or, you know, if you got a mature tree, this is what you can do now.
Yeah, you can add to other trees and you can think about other spaces, right? Like, I think sometimes all of us will find spots where we think, you know, it's hard for us to imagine things as different, right? So when a tree leaves a neighborhood, it's really challenging, right? Because you're thinking, oh, there was so much shade. Now I can see that neighbor's house and I didn't ever see that before. And when we're thinking about replanting in a spot, we think I'll put another tree exactly where that is. So I kind of challenge everyone to think a little bit with their imagination of where could I add trees? What spaces are there that are available right now that aren't going to cause problems? But it'll be a small tree for a long time. I mean, these trees, there's a lot of trees we've planted that will live us all, right? Like they take a long, especially the huge ones, they take a long time to grow and they live for a long time. And still then, sometimes they take a long time to die as well. So you're really always thinking about the future. I mean, there's many sayings about trees, but you're planting them for future generations to enjoy, right? And when you can do some of this stuff, I think, and you can think about other spots, if you've got spots in your yard saying, you know, where would a tree be a good spot here? You can think about it, that this will be someone else will be thankful that this tree was planted in the future.
I think John had another question.
Planting urban trees is very important, very good. We're speaking to we discussed, but planting trees here and there or even in smaller plots, not going to reestablish a native ecosystem. I'm wondering if the NPCA has plans, strategies ongoing to enlarge out and expand already wooded areas, which is probably the only way to reestablish a native ecosystem.
So what you're talking about, there's a couple different options of, you're talking about targeted restoration. So it's trying to, so the question is about, does the NPCA have plans to target areas to help reestablish forests and make them larger? Have I got that? Rewild them, okay. So the NPCA has done a lot of research on this and about where we're at, but what you're talking about is a targeted approach. And so a targeted approach is saying we look at all the kind of different co-benefits that would exist from planting trees everywhere. And we say, this is the best spot. If I could plant one tree in all of Niagara, I would plant it right here. And one of the challenges we have in Niagara is that over 90% is privately owned. So I could make the best map in the world. I could spend 10 years making this map and saying, if we could only plant one tree, it'd go right here. And I could go to that landowner and I could say, listen, you've got the best spot. I want to plant this tree right here. And they could say, please leave. I don't want to do that. That's part of my view. That's part of this. That's what I just don't want to. And so it's really challenging in that regard. So instead, what we do is we try to take a look at all those co-benefits that exist. And we usually put big call outs to the general public and say, who's interested in planting trees? This is kind of what we're looking for. And then we take an opportunistic approach, which is of all the projects we have here, these ones offer the most co-benefits and offer the most add back. So this is talking about doing things like, are we adding to existed forest areas? Are we joining different forest areas? Or are we surrounding significant features? So if we have a slough forest or like a swamp forest, are we adding onto it to create a larger buffer to create more wildlife habitat? Can we connect these things? And when we do those things, it adds to the largest forest, but targeted restoration can be very powerful. The challenge is that it requires a willing partner in the person who owns the land to care for, or to first of all want it, but also to care for and maintain it, right? So it's challenging in that regard. So for the most part, we look at where can we do our best work and how do we make the best investments with what people are interested in. So we're always trying to talk to people about the benefits of these things and come up with cost share programs so that we can do this with them. and to make it affordable, but it's a challenge to say, like, to have too much of a strategy. The other thing is sometimes people get their backs up. If you put a map out that says this whole area should be forest, someone says, that's my vineyard. That's how I make my living. And it becomes really challenging to suggest to somebody that this would really be better as trees. Even if that's the case, it's someone who's has a lot of money invested in something, and that's the way they make their living. So it's, we typically like to work with the people who are saying, I've got some marginal farmland here, or I've got this space here that we think no one's really using this in one of our parks, but we can add to this and it can create a stronger connection this way.
Bob?
My question is kind of opposite of John's. Not for reestablishing the ecosystem, but for putting trees in urban areas for the other benefits that they kind of communication. Is there a list of species that are the most resilient in compacted and disturbed soils that municipalities can take advantage of because they know that the investment in that tree is going to continue to grow?
There are certainly lists like that. And one of the other things to consider is also like salt tolerance, because sometimes.
Could you just repeat the
Oh,
question?
sorry. Oh, there was a question if there was lists of native trees that do well in urban soils or urban areas. And yes, there certainly are. I don't have any with me today. I didn't bring a list, but you'd be looking for things that are able to handle some of our compacted soils. I mean, I agree with Jason wholeheartedly that we should try and do some soil restoration first and get that foundation right before we start planting trees. But you're going to look for things, there's other things that are going to be challenging, such as just road salt. If you're living in a municipality that has uses a lot of road salt, we can put down great soil. Then we start, every time it's a bit of frost and we salt the roads, and there's any spray it ends up all over the lawn or over the place where the trees are planted. We have to be careful of those things. But there are trees that are very tough, that will be able to handle these things. But it's also important to try and create the conditions. We don't just want the toughest trees. We want to have some of these trees that have additional benefits, but we try to create the conditions for them, right? We don't need to have all the hard-nosed trees. We can get some of the really lovely trees. But it requires helping create the conditions for them. Yeah.
Well, I have one last question for you. You've talked about native trees and you've talked about Carolinian trees. Are they one and the same, or are they different? If you could.
Sure. Well,
Answer.
here they are. If we were in Kapuskasing or Ottawa or Winnipeg, they have their own set of native trees, right? So we've got our ecoregion here, and we happen to be in the Carolinian zone here. So within the Carolinian zone, there's still things like microsites that exist. So some areas where you find things only growing on kind of like the north side of the escarpment, or you only find things growing in swampy areas. So this is a little bit about why it's important to always try to look at that surrounding. What are your systems, or what is the conditions you're looking at planting a tree before you start selecting trees? And one way of doing that, which is always great, is if you've got nearby trees that are doing really well, try to take note of take a look around. There's all kinds of great apps that exist now for helping identify different species, and you can just scan them with the camera and it will tell you, oh, that's this, or that's this, or that's this. And they're fairly accurate. I mean, it's always good to ask somebody else to have one, but if you know someone who knows a bit more, but you can look around to see what's doing well.
I can actually do that on my iPhone with AI, and I don't even need to pay for a special app
I
to
think I've
just
heard that,
point it at, and it tells me what it is. So
which is fantastic, right? Because it can start telling you all kinds of things about the environment around you. But yeah, these were the native trees here. And I think I put up, I don't know, 9 or something like that, some of the species which are a little more novel for this area, but there's plenty of native trees here. There's all kinds of maples and oaks and everything else that's native to this area. But you just want to find things that are growing in this area and they're from this area. And it's great also if you can have seed sources from this area as well. That's putting some of the assisted migration aside, but even species that there's plenty of some of the suppliers we find on this list can tell you exactly where they got their seed from. They can say, I got that from Fort Erie, or I got that from this little spot in Dundas. But there's great seed collection protocols that exist for nurseries, but they should be able to to some degree of accuracy where these plants come from.
What other places in South Asia plant seeds, especially not trees necessarily? Is there a seed exchange or native plants?
I think that there's an event that happens every year called CD Saturday, and I know that the MPCA has attended it before, and there have been people who've collected it. I know there's also some of the nurseries will also sell seed, less so for trees, to my knowledge, but for other native wildflowers and things like that, they will sell you it. Sometimes it's mixed together, like a wildflower mix for meadows or a wet meadow or something like this. Sorry, I didn't answer the question are there places that will sell you native seed for plants? And the answer is yes. It depends on what you're interested in doing. If you're interested in germinating trees, I would recommend going to collect some and get a tree germination book and see what you can figure out. But otherwise, you can buy, there are some nurseries that will sell you native seed.
I mean, online, you can certainly buy the seed. Wondered if there's an informal seed exchange network within Ontario.
I think mostly it's that CD Saturday kind of event, and often that's zucchini and tomatoes and everything else. But occasionally they'll have people who have native seeds.
All right, well, thank you very much, Stuart. I want to thank Stuart McPherson and Jason Henry for your presentations. They were really excellent. I want to let people know that this session is being recorded so that you'll be able to go online and watch these presentations sort of at your own convenience, which is great. I want to thank everyone who's come out tonight to hear these presentations, and thank you for your commitment to environmental stewardship and enhancing the sustainability of our community. And I look forward to everybody coming out to a planting event, and hopefully we'll have a special Earth Day event come this spring. And last but not least, I really want to thank Jillian from the town of Grimsby, because she's made all the arrangements to figure out these two excellent candidates to come and talk to us and take care of arranging this evening. So thank you very much, Jillian. Wonderful job. And you're a great resource for the town of Grimsby too. So with that, I'll say good night and thank you again very much.